So we're going to do a quick overview of the equalization software at ratiostudy.org. If anybody does not have login information, there'll be an email at the end that you can request it. And then we're going to talk about the MS-1 submissions for towns, cities, and villages, what's changing in 2020, how to data enter the MS-1, how to upload MS-1 data files from your CAMA provider if they support that, and how to finalize and send your values to the state. So changes for 2020. The electric energy storage system exemption per RSA 7285 was enacted, so you'll find that on the exemptions tab now. And there's also been a revision to the reporting of the utility values, and this is the biggest change. This is to accommodate RSA 728D. So that is the formula that's prescriptive now on how you value distribution assets. So DRA is asking for a couple of different values. The value of the distribution asset that was valued using that formula, any distribution assets that were not valued by that formula, looking for the value of that, and then a generation value, a transmission value, and then the total assessed value. And note, the total assessed value is the required field. Given the situation, some vendors indicated they might not be able to accommodate this sort of reporting so quickly in all of their jurisdictions. I think that they were largely successful in getting it out. Generally speaking, but if you're not able to get this level of detail, it's really the total assessed value that is the required value. That's what moves forward for tax rate setting and equalization purposes. So that is the important value for this year. So there are two process workflows here. There is the data entry process workflow. So in other words, you just log into the application and key in your values. Once you are done with that, there are some validation checks. There is a parallel workflow where you can upload a data file that comes out of your CAMA provider. There's a step there for your utilities matching. So this requires that your utility values or the names of your utilities in your CAMA match the names that DRA uses to refer to the utility. So there's a step there of matching them if they don't already line up. And then you funnel back into the validation check. So there are a number of required fields on the form. So before you submit, you'll go through all the validation checks to make sure that all of those fields are filled out and that everything is appropriate for submission. So then you go through your submission, which is a two-step process. The first step is an electronic submission. And the next step is actually printing out a copy of your MS-1 and getting it signed by your assessing officials. If you are organized as a town, the select board are your assessing officials. If you are a city, it's the city assessor or board of assessors that are your elected officials. So you do have to do that e-file submission and then get that copy signed by your elected officials. And the reason that it's two-step is we don't have a good way in statute for someone to e-file on behalf of an entire board. So that's why it's structured like that, just to make sure that the whole board approves. Now, I skipped the very first step there, which is requesting an extension. That can be the beginning of either step. So if you are unable to prepare the MS-1 by the due date, you can request an extension to that. And actually, you have to if you're not going to file it by that due date. This is also very helpful for DRA in planning out their workload in terms of tax rate settings. If they know you're not going to be able to get your MS-1 in until mid-October, they can prioritize other entities that will be able to get their assessed values in sooner. So that is very helpful to DRA. And that is where we're going to start here with the demonstration, and then we'll move right into data entry. So let me switch over to the application here, and we will take a look at the extension process. So as I log in, you're all familiar with the interface here. We're going to do 2020. Yours will already be selected on 2020. And we're simply going to go over to our MS1 tab. Now, you won't have as many municipalities as I have unless you're a contract assessor working in multiple towns. You see I have a couple here that are already submitted. I have some that are not started. I have some that are in progress. You also have all of your village districts down here at the bottom, and in parentheses, they say which municipality they are within. So let's start here with just the request extension process. So we see we have extension right up here. We'll click request. All you have to do is pick a value. I know there are a lot of revals going on. Pick the date that you would like that extension for. Put in an explanation of your extension and simply click submit. That will send off the request to the property tax director at DRA, and you'll get an email back once that request has been approved. So if you know you're going to be late, please submit an extension as soon as possible. That'll be the most helpful. So that's the extension process, pretty straightforward. Let's go through the basic data entry. So note we have the ability to upload an XML file from our CAMA vendor if we have one. We're not going to start there. We'll just go ahead and start the MS1. So it's preparing our file for us. So we'll just run through this quickly. You have a bunch of summary questions here. Who appraises your utility? We have our electric companies. If we add a line, here are our new valuations. So we've got distribution assets using the formula, the value of distribution assets not valued using the formula, your generation value, transmission, and your total. And again, total is the required value here. So if you are unable to produce these, the total is what we're looking for. So that's how you add a utility. And I'm just going to kind of breeze through this very quickly. You have your gas utilities, your water, and your other. If we go into credits and exemptions, you have all of your veterans credits. So the amount of the credit, the number of individuals, the estimated tax credit, and then the maximum allowed being the amount by the number of individuals. So this will check the amount per exemption you're saying based on the statutory limit. So if you're outside of those limits, it will warn you and tell you to correct that. We go over to disabled and deaf. So these are income and asset limits for single and married individuals to qualify for disabled and the deaf exemption. Your elderly exemption, a little bit different. You have the number of people getting the exemption per age group for first-time filers, and then the total number, amount per individual, actual granted and max allowable. And elderly also has an income and asset limit. Then we have our other exemptions. Most of these have been around for a while. This was new last year, I believe. This is the optional commercial industrial construction exemption. So if you adopted that, or if you adopted any of these, you just indicate that you have the number of properties, the percent of assessed value, and total exemption granted. So moving on to property reports, we've got your current use reporting. We've got your land use change tax. We've got your conservation restriction easement. And I know, bear with me, this is a huge form if any of you are first-time filers. We've got your discretionary easements. You've got your discretionary preservation easements. We have our farm structures. We have our TIF reporting, our tax increment finance reporting, which if you don't have TIF districts, don't worry about this. If you do, this is the same way that we've been reporting TIFs for a couple of years. You can actually upload files if you have the formation files of the TIF that describe how the increment is created. And this flows automatically into the calculation of the total assessed value. So this will remove the increment for you now. Go ahead and remove that. We have our payment in lieu of taxes, state and federal, White Mountain. And then if you have any other TIFs with renewable energy or TIFs pertinent to 3186 Revenue Code 3186, payment in lieu of taxes. So you can add your TIFs in there. Then we have our summary information. You've got who is the assessor. You can add your municipal officials. Then we have our reporting of our land acreage and valuation, our building valuation, and you get the comparison to the previous year. So this is what DRA is looking at when they're doing their review. They're just looking at the previous year and making sure that the assessed value makes sense. Your utilities and timber valuation. We have our exemption summary here. We have our optional exemptions. So if you've adopted it, here is that new electric solar energy system exemption. And finally, we have our totals. And this was formerly the front page of the MS1, but you do have to fill everything out for it to populate. So quite a long form. This has all of the values that are used to set your tax rate. Those are the lines down at the bottom there. There used to only be two. Now there are a couple. We have 21C used for your county rate. This is used for your local education and municipal rate. So this removes that construction exemption. And then you have your net valuation without utilities or TIFs, which is used for state ed. So all of those are there, and it tells you pretty clearly what they are used for. Lastly, we have notes. So you are able to put down notes. If something has changed in town, you want to write a note to DRA just to give them a little bit of background as to why something is different. You can do that here. So that is doing the data entry, and you can always do this after you do the XML upload as well. You can always edit the data. But if I go back, save and home, you can't start doing the data entry like this and then try to feed in an MS1 data upload. You'll notice I was in Merrimack. I don't have the ability to upload XML in Merrimack anymore. That's because I have started. So let me flip back over to the PowerPoint here for a slide or two. We'll get a little background and then we'll continue on with the demonstration. So when we have our MS1 exports, you can get them out of your CAMA. I'm not 100% sure which CAMA vendors have them. I know that Avatar definitely does, Vision usually does. So if you do have that export, you can use that. Again, it's only available if it's not started. It will prompt you to do your utility mapping. So if the names of your utilities don't match exactly with what DRA calls them, which frequently happens if they've transferred ownership, you need to go ahead and match those up. So we'll take a look here at what that looks like in the application as I switch back over. So if you did get started with your MS1, maybe you forgot that you wanted to use a data file, you can always, as I'm going to do, just delete this. And now we're able to upload our XML data. So this is a pretty simple process. We'll just select our file, open it up, and this will be the file that comes out of your CAMA platform. It'll be a .xml file. So we'll upload it. It does a couple validation checks. Number one, does the name in the XML file match the name of the entity that you're uploading? So this is kind of a high-level check if you have multiple towns that you're uploading the correct town. So we get our green check mark there. And now it's checking the utility name from your data file. Utility name from your data files on the right here versus what DRA calls them. So you'll see a red X here if it cannot match the utility. And all you have to do is pick the utility from the dropdown. And it would be advisable if you do get any red X, it's helpful to go back into your CAMA and just update the name to be whatever it is in this left-hand dropdown, then you won't have to do it again. So we have our electric, our gas, our water, and our other. And we can just go ahead and apply that upload. So that'll process that data file for you. And now if I go back in, I have all of my data submitted here. So definitely saves a lot of time. If your CAMA vendor does have that file, advisable to use it. And as you can see, this is editable now. That just kind of jump starts you into the process. So we have kind of our preliminary value. So now that we have some data, let's take a look at a couple of things. You saw me use the Save and Home button down here at the bottom. We also have the Save and Recalculate button. So if you've entered some values here and you'd like to get the totals to update down below, you can save and recalculate. This also doesn't redirect you to home. So if you just want to save and stay on the same screen, this would be what you clicked. You can also view your MS1 report. So this would be how you get out the report for you to review and for you to pass off to the assessing officials, whether it's your city board of assessors or your municipal select board. Just taking a moment here to load. Okay, so a couple of things here. All of the people are populated from that last screen where it asked who the assessing officials were. So if that's your board of assessors, your select board, you can just put that. It also asks for your signature here as the preparer. You'll notice there's very heavy draft watermarking. That is because we have not submitted or clicked the submit button within the application, right? If we went through and submitted this, that draft watermark would go away. So this is the key that you shouldn't be giving this to your assessing official to sign because this is still a draft. So if we move through, this looks much more similar to the old MS1 form. You should be pretty familiar with this. And it goes through all of the same information that we just saw. Like all of the reports in Equalization, it is exportable to Word, Excel. I don't know, PowerPoint's very useful in this case. PDF is probably the easiest if you just want to print it off to review. So let's download that for us. Now we have a nice PDF that we can go ahead and print off. So that is the reporting. And again, you can run that report at any time. Couple other things I want to highlight here while we're in the app. You might have noticed these blue question marks here at the top of all of the sections. Those actually go to help about that specific section. So if you're not quite sure what to do with a particular section, you might find the help that you need by clicking the blue question mark. And we've got help specifically about that section. It also tells you the checks that are going to be done. So those question marks can be pretty helpful. The general help button up here actually goes to the whole knowledge base. So if you're having trouble anywhere in the application, the help button does actually bring you someplace. At least I think it's helpful, but it's not just kind of a generic help page. It's actually the knowledge base for the whole application. Okay, so just a couple more slides here, and then I'll open it up for questions here. So again, you're going to click the submit button, and the system is going to perform a number of data checks, and it's going to prompt you one error at a time to fix what you need to fix. So click submit. If it goes all the way through, great. There also might be a red bar that pops up and says you're missing a required field, or the amount of exemption you're granting is over the maximum amount that you can grant. So it will just prompt you kind of one error at a time to correct your filing. Once you get through it, it'll prompt you for your name as the preparer, first and last, phone number and email, and you'll have to click the certification that this filing is, to the best of your knowledge, true and complete. So once you do that, you just want to print off that copy using that MS1 print button that I just showed you, and get your elected officials to sign it. And then you want to scan and upload the signature page. If you're having trouble with that, you can also email it off to the folks at Equalization. They can attach it for you. They will review your MS1 before you submit that, but they will not complete it. So you can get teed up, but that won't move on in the process until they get that signed copy. So definitely make sure that as soon as you e-file it, that you get that printed off and get that on your select board or your assessing officials agenda to review and sign off on that. So let me just show you a couple of those things in the application. Let me try to submit. I'm sure I won't be able to. So what it's doing now is checking tab by tab for things that don't match the business rules. So it's doing all of the validation. And I did not put in the assessor information. in the Summary tab. Let's see if I can do it now. This got pretty close to the end, so that's probably it. Now, if there are any more than this, I won't make you sit through it, but nope, that's it. So for the submission, you just put in your first name, last name, phone number, do the certification, and that will submit it to DRA. I'm not going to do it just so that I can be queued up for the next training. Last piece here I will show you, and then I'll put up some contact info and take any questions. So we have our signed copies uploaded here. If I had a submitted one, it would show you the upload button instead of not uploaded. The signed copy has been uploaded. So there'll be a link right here, exactly like these buttons, that you can upload a signed copy of the signature page, and that will complete your filing. And I promise if you don't upload one after a little bit, you'll start getting bothered to upload one because they want to clear these out as quickly as they can. Okay, so I've got one last slide here. And then I'll take any questions. So there are some materials on the DRA website. Honestly, the help button in the application itself is probably the best resource. It has those page-specific help. It also has video recordings of trainings like this that you can refer to, as well as a user manual.